Well, I appreciate everybody coming this morning. Dale and Mike and myself, we're going to try to address environmental decommissioning and demolition from a contractor's, consultant, and owner standpoint. So I'd like to start our meeting with like a safety moment. All our projects, weekly meetings, major conference calls, and site projects at my company start with a safety topic or a safety moment. Performing demolition decommissioning is very dangerous, and a project that is planned, has complete specifications, which are well written, and proper personnel are utilized, could be ruined with just one accident. Slips, trips, and falls make up a majority of general industry accidents. They account for over 15% of all accidental fatalities, and they are second cause fatalities behind motor vehicles. OSHA has identified the fatal four of types of accidents which lead to serious outcomes. Number one is slips and falls. The second one is electrocutions, and then struck by objects. And the last one is finally caught in between. Tips to prevent include keeping your walkways and work areas clear, provide an on-site electrician to verify lockout and tagout procedures, and secure floor holes in all openings. From a contractor's perspective, in addition to making sure all individuals go home the same way they came to work each day, safety is important for vendors and contractors that work for all you guys. The contractor's safety record is a critical factor in deciding when a contractor can work for your companies. Owners should evaluate on a 5-year basis your EMR, emergency modification rating, and also the total recordable incident rate, which you'll hear is TRIR. I just wanted to go into briefly that, being an investor recovery professional, managers, and contractors, you all have numerous responsibilities in performing tasks of demolition, environmental work, and asset disposition. During the course of these activities, the professional and their respective departments or companies are often evaluated on return on investment, ROI. How much money can they return to a company for equipment, structures, tanks, and complete plants? Many factors come into play. In addition, they require the ability to work with other team members to balance between the revenue incentives and risks for environmental projects. Some of these include regulations. There's federal, state, and even greater local regulations now. There's the community. You're dealing with a lot of public relations. A lot of the old plants that are shut down are in residential communities. And disposal of waste and potential past spills is big also when getting rid of equipment and large plants and decommissioning projects. And then you have different recycling options for a lot of your waste. It's not all about the end result. So what I mean is you see every day we watch news footage in the social media of buildings, plants, and structures being demolished. Only 1% of all actual demolitions include implosion techniques to accomplish this mission. What is involved in preparing the project for the final demolition process will be explained today from a contractor's perspective. During the next 20, 30 minutes, I'll present key items which are important leading up to the end result. The next slide I'd like to talk about is some of the permits and approvals that are required. Local, state, and federal permits may be required to perform demolition work. Projects can be delayed or halted without securing the proper permits before demolition. Before implementing a D&D project in a specific state, city, or town, there's additional local permits that are required. I suggest to start the permit process well ahead of the actual anticipation date to start the work, as it can take anywhere from 10 days to up to 6 months to gain all the approvals. We recommend once you choose a successful contractor for your project to issue an award letter so they can actually begin the permit process. For example, we dealt with projects in Miami, Florida, where you need a planning board approval, signed and notarized demolition building permit application, and associated sub-permits if they're required. 2 sets of signed and sealed boundary surveys. It's also applicable that you may need a public works approval for right-of-way, submitted dust control procedures, electrical power and gas disconnection letters, and filing a DERM plan, which is a review of environmental-related work. So it's a lot of permits and approvals for submittals that actually before the project gets started. In New York City, Chicago, and other large metropolitan areas, we actually use firms that are called expediters, and they can bundle the permits and get the approvals for you quicker. So they don't actually do the permits, but you just give it to them, and they know the right people to go see. A majority of the demolition projects have an asbestos abatement component to them. Asbestos notification can be submitted and will take 10 business days to secure. Some agencies require a recent updated asbestos-containing survey, so you'll see ACM for asbestos-containing material, survey to be filled out with the application. Laws and regulations are constantly changing, so review the ACM survey for your company, and that if they perform one, and survey or resurvey the work location, providing updates to the existing documents. Regulations constantly change, sampling techniques change, so you need to kind of review that. That could delay the project. Have a plan also in place to address the stormwater, which is called the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, which is your SWEP. You'll hear a lot of acronyms, so it's very prevalent in our industry. The plan addresses the reduction and elimination of contaminants, stormwater from runoff, rain and wash water. The sites need to determine the applicability of the regulations. So first check your standard industrial code, your SIC, and if the activity disturbs over 1 acre of land, you're required to have a plan put into place. If the SWEP is required, the company and the contractor are required to obtain a permit and work closely with the various agencies. Also, investigative permits are necessary for discharging of water on site, or if you can use your existing discharge permits at the facility. A lot of companies are keeping their wastewater system in place so they can use it for discharge permits. Submission of project plans. All contractors have a health and safety plan, which includes all safety policies and procedures for their firm. A site-specific plan, which is your SS-HASP, is submitted to the owner before work is to begin. The owner has their in-house safety department or consultant review the plan for completeness and to check if it correlates to the type of the task the contractor is performing for the job. The HASP, site-specific HASP, is an important and should be a living document and should be reviewed with the work crew at the start of the work and be referenced in every job hazard analysis plan, which here is JHA. Document is to be in a location which is accessible for reference at any time. So just that from a contractor's perspective, like I mentioned, it's a living document, and once you do it, it should be reviewed on a daily basis, especially if the work changes dramatically from the work procedures that were originally submitted. The document should also include safety data sheets, SDSs, and you might have heard them formerly as MSDSs, for material safety data sheets. So they're similar, they just they shorten the name. And any chemicals that are brought on site, they should have SDSs associated with them in the safety plan. During the bid process, the contractor has developed their methodology and has described the work in their proposal. Before workers begin, a greater in-depth site work plans to be developed and can be combined with the site-specific HASP as submitted as a separate document. Following, when the demolition work is ready to begin, we suggest to have a kickoff construction meeting should be scheduled. All parties included is the health and safety officer, a superintendent, a project manager, and the principal of the firm who will be responsible for the QA/QC, quality control and quality assurance. During the kickoff meeting, suggested to have a walk down of the project to be performed, since the person who estimated and bid the work may be different than the crew assigned to the project. You may have heard the term onboarding. So, and we just did that, and it was a totally separate crew that came on, and it was very helpful with the client to walk through the whole facility again. And during a recent kickoff meeting, one of my clients presented a PowerPoint presentation and of all their internal standard operating procedures, SOPs, and summarized their experience with past demolition work. This was helpful for us moving forward to assist in situations to avoid and adjust the workflow and procedures where tasks were similar in nature from the previous work. So it's, we call it like share your lessons learned. So especially for a lot of companies out there who are doing multiple and recurring projects. Yeah, this is like one of the slides that are kind of near and dear to me because it's something that a lot of companies don't actually spend the money to do, and I really feel that they should spend more time, performing this task. It's doing a regulated materials environmental assessment. So before construction work begins, a complete environmental assessment is performed. We find that projects involving redeployment, demolition, dismantlement, and potential reuse, that the environmental assessment task seems to be recognized as most least important. I find that many companies provide a general statement to bidders before the sale or in the bidding documents that all environmental quantities and concerns be responsible of the contractor to review and obtain. During the assessment task, if full demolition is to be performed, destruction testing is recommended to identify the absence or presence of hidden environmental concerns. A complete hazardous assessment is not just an asbestos survey. It should include all these additional components, including asbestos, which was commonly used in construction materials up to about 1982. Asbestos was found in almost every material, including tiles, mastic, paint, insulation, barriers, brick, gaskets, roofing. The list seems endless. Lead paint is prevalent in many structures, equipment, beams, and piping, and in paint. Lead can be tested via chip sampling or using an XRF device, which is an X-ray device, which can detect about up to 5 multiple layers of paint. Concerns for contractors arise when concrete deemed for on-site crushing and backfill is coated with paint on the exterior, so you need to bring that off-site, so it's important to test that also. You may hear a PACM, which is presumed asbestos material. It can be designated as PACM if similar material was sampled and determined to be asbestos. Additional costs can be reduced if the material is actually tested instead of assumed. Components in older facilities, which are typically assumed ACM, would be like electrical wiring, gaskets, and potential boiler internals. Then you have universal waste, which should be included in this assessment. There are typically bulbs, mercury switches, electronic waste, batteries, exit signs. A lot of mercury-containing devices, the thermostats, and equipment switches. Then you have PCBs. They stand for polychlorinated biphenyls and are regulated by TSCA, which stands for the Toxic Substance Control Act. There won't be a test at the end, so don't worry about it. They're commonly found in transformers, paint, concrete, and caulking. On a current project that we're performing, the caulking compound at a paint facility was tested and determined positive for PCBs. They tested it after we were awarded the project, and to do the abatement and disposal properly of the PCB and caulk, it cost them over $250,000. So you could have reduced your costs if you tested, your pre-bidding. Then you have chemicals on site, which are chemical containers, drums, totes, compressed gas cylinders, and other chemicals need to be identified. And NORM, no, it's not the character from the TV show, Dave. All right. That stands for naturally occurring radioactive material. NORM waste is found in numerous industries, including metals, mining, power plants, and refineries. Oil and gas deposits contain low-level radionuclides. These are naturally occurring material can separate out, and they're found in sludges, scaling from interior pipes, and can contaminate equipment components. Also, we have concrete and soils. During the environmental assessment and walkthrough, areas should be identified for visual staining, and a further investigation needs to be completed based on some historical information, past bills, and environmental sampling or past remediation cleanups that were performed. The contractor should be made aware of these situations to help determine health precautions for the workers, and determination of soil and concrete can be utilized as backfill. We were working in a plant in New Jersey for a chemical client, and we weren't told there was 2 separate sites on site owned by 2 different companies that were involved in some remediation at the site. So it caused some concern from a health and safety standpoint. So in conclusion with this slide is a complete environmental assessment which covers the shown items before demolition is started will lead to a complete bid specification, which will result in a greater detailed work proposal from the contractor, which leads to less price variations among the proposals and will ultimately reduce any potential change orders for the owner. Work sequencing. The construction schedule is usually dictated by 2 things, time and money. During the bidding process, the contractors all submitted a tentative schedule from mobilization to final demob. The project is only as good as the plan. So review the schedule before deciding on the successful bidder to see if it meets all guidelines for your company. The schedule is a working document through the D&D process, so continue review during the weekly progress meetings. Numerous situations can affect work sequencing. Weather conditions is the key element which can delay the schedule. Monitor the upcoming weather patterns. When the crews can work, if you have extreme heat or cold conditions, may vary. On a recent project in the Midwest that we're performing, our project was delayed when there was a minus 22 degrees, actually outside of Chicago. That's without wind chill factor. And the building lost the heat and pipes broke. Think about that when we're in beautiful San Diego. Any project in the Northeast, and another project we had in the Northeast was shut down completely due to, excuse me. Yeah, due to hurricanes, excuse me, hurricanes and flooding. If we anticipate adverse weather conditions, we could deviate from the schedule and work around any future weather patterns. A majority of larger demolition projects have a full-time staff or management connected to the project, a dedicated health and safety officer, a project manager, superintendent, and other team members. Progress meetings need to be scheduled for the same time each week and will foster communication and discussion. Once held on a daily or weekly basis, the minute notes are taken and can be sent electronically to the owner and for parties that are not included in the meetings. The progress reports should include work progress for the week, man hours, any safety concerns or incidents to include near misses and lessons learned. Labor and equipment on site should be included, and several pictures of the ongoing work. We find this report is sent out to upper management individuals, like I said, who are at the actual meetings. What is the end date driven by? When considering all of the environmental tasks and options, keep in mind other considerations like your expiration of your permits that you obtained, taxes, incurring costs, or recognizing revenue from that current fiscal year. So there could be a lot of issues out from the project what upper management needs to consider to get the project completed. Manage the critical path. Develop a timeline of events and keep the schedule updated with any changes. Allow adequate time for critical environmental tasks, because the work is very labor and time consuming. An example is like a complete power plant or refineries in the process of selling or deconstructing a part of the plant as required to keep a section of the terminal or substation for future or continued use. The entire sale dictates on the removal and dismantling of the main plant and turning over the remaining pieces as part of the sale. This portion could be a very small part of a bigger picture and will dictate also the schedule. Coordination and utilization of subcontractors. Due to the complexity and the amount of various work tasks that demolition contractors, they become the prime or GC for a project. And they procure a lot of specialty companies to perform some of the tasks. Some of the subcontractors can also be responsible for a large amount of the work on hand. You have asbestos abatement, decommissioning, and trucking and transportation are typically handled by subcontracts. We should follow the same procedures and vetting policies for your company when subcontractors are involved. Subcontractors should submit all their safety information, plans, licenses, and be vetted in the same manner that you vetted the demolition contractor you hired. And the company is approved in one of these databases. They should be approved in one of the databases your company may utilize, or you will need an exception for the contractor to hire the firm. I'm sure a lot of your companies use ISNetworld, Browse, and safety databases similar to that. There's been a lot of times that we've had wanted to hire certain companies, fencing companies, trucking companies who are included in that process, and it just makes it more difficult, or we need to find a firm that has gone through all the standard operating procedures. So pre-demo considerations. As the companies utilize the investment recovery managers to move valuable equipment, it is important to consider the entire demolition process to limit the company's liabilities and financial burdens. Will the work be a selective demolition or structures of a complete horizontal and vertical demolition project? Numerous projects we perform may include building separations and rigging out of designated items while keeping the building still intact. A selective demolition project brings additional considerations to the work and additional planning and care. All environmental and safety risks must be considered for the work. Is there a SPCC plan established in case of accident or releases? An SPCC plan stands for Spill Prevention and Countermeasures Plan, and the control is the place to prevent spills, and also is the equipment utilized by the contractor checked for leaks before being brought on site? Are systems depressurized? Are tanks and containers closed? We suggest having a fire prevention standing operating procedure in place. When performing a demolition project at a paper plant a few years ago, we were required to have a 24-hour fire watch due to the paper and associated byproducts were considered combustible material. Also, if the plant is shut down, contact and coordination should be made with the local agencies so they're aware of potential chemicals and work conditions at the site. I know it's people say don't contact the local agencies, but we find if we contact fire and police agencies, let them know what we're doing at the site, and coordinate that with maybe the PR department for the owner, it's actually always been very successful for us. So just keep them in the loop. Are all individuals qualified to perform the task at hand? Do they have all the necessary licenses and certifications? If the owner can supply a representative who's familiar with the plant operations, it would be a very valuable asset in answering any questions along the way for the contractor before critical tasks are performed. Pre-cleaning of equipment. We should drain the lines and open all the low points to secure all liquids have been cleared and decommissioned before demolition. During the recent power plant, actually semiconductor plant, that was transferred over to us, their water cooling lines weren't deconned. So we found it out before we started doing demolition, and we drained all the glycol from them. That could have been a big spill, and thousands of gallons could have been released into the building. Contractors must implement strategies to reduce noise and air emissions also. Some methods could be to utilize newer pieces of equipment and stabilizing impervious surfaces created by the result of the demolition activity and associated traffic. Pre-cleaning of dust could also be an option when dealing with some older plants like cement plants or car manufacturing plants. Depending on the type of work and plant condition, an environmental baseline study should be established to verify before and during work levels for conditions before and after and during. Implementation of the R's in D&D. I have to include this R, that's the mantra of the Investment Recovery Association, the 7 R's. Implementing the investment recovery mantra by honoring sustainability and stewardship while utilizing 7 R's in everyday functions are key components of the investment recovery manager. Part of our job is to perform asset disposition and maintain their company's goals in economic, social, and environmental sensitive manner and avoid all environmental consequences. LEED Construction Practices is a certification program instituted by the U.S. Green Building Council and stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Designs. Contractors and owners need to work with and to utilize selective demolition, redeployment, and dismantling strategies to increase landfill diversion, increase salvage, recycling, and reuse opportunities. LEED is mostly for public projects, but if you go in with that philosophy and you try to obtain and reach a 95% LEED certification, you're likely to improve overall project profitability and contribute to environmental footprint reduction. Ask the contractor for a plan in their proposal on how they plan to manage the waste coming from the demolition, which will go a long way to reaching these percentages for your LEED. Try to insert your expertise as an investment recovery manager before the demolition is awarded and to assist in taking inventory of all equipment at location of the project. By providing the equipment information, including size, serial numbers, description, other key factors, it will assist the demolition contractor in the bidding process to enable contractors to market the equipment instead of providing just salvage costs. The potential for environmental cost-saving measures in the demolition process are numerous. Wood can be shredded and utilized on site for disposal at a recycling plant. Used oil can be bulked and reused as heating fuel. All ferrous and non-ferrous materials can be segregated and transported to steel mills for reuse. Concrete pedestals, foundations, and asphalt can be crushed or milled for use in backfill for openings, basements, and potentially for roadbed. C&D material is one of the largest waste streams. Construction and debris, or C&D, is a major waste stream, and the owner will need to work with the contractor to identify ways and methods to reduce and eliminate material from heading to the local landfill. Doors, carpeting, sheetrock, benches, desks, insulation are some of the many items which should be prioritized for donation, recycling, and potential reuse. The last slide is record keeping and documentation. At the end of the work, the hired contractor should supply you with a complete package of manifest, logbooks, weight tickets, and other pertinent information for your records. Closeout package should include manifesting and documentation of all collected waste. Remember, you hear the expression cradle to grave. It's the owner's responsibility, and the contractor should keep all manifest copies to include in the closeout package. In addition, all salvage tickets and end disposition sites for any equipment should be sold throughout the project. Just because you give the project over to a contractor doesn't mean you should follow out where the end result is going to be of your equipment. The closeout package is important to a contractor because numerous projects are being asked to supply a payment performance bond, and owners are taking a retainage out of each invoice, sometimes up to 10%. So once the owner receives all their final documentation and punch list items are completed, the owner can release these final items. So I just kind of shared with you a little bit from a contractor perspective, which I find is important before you actually take the whole building down. Thank you for your time.